Previously on Animorphs. Drama. Straight away, it's terrifying computer face, funny eye horns. Cassie's a horse. The Yerks are a-comin'. I do care, Jake. Teach me about the animals. And that brings us to here. Book 2. The Visitor. Published in June 1996, along with Book 1, presumably, this book promised even more hilarity, even more morphs, and, let's be honest, even more trauma for our poor Animorphs. In something of a shift from Book 1, we no longer have creepy lizard child, but instead we have this quite gorgeous illustration that reminds me a lot of that bit in Chamber of Secrets where Hermione gets turned into a cat. I did look to see if there was a CG version of this cover to match Lizardface, but as far as I can tell there wasn't one, and this is the original cover. So maybe they weren't sure which approach to go for from the off, and who knows, time will tell. It begins. This book is from Rachel's perspective. That's Jake's cousin, which we know from the first book. She's the one who can turn into an elephant, so I like her. She's the one who's described as clean and wholesome, aka white.
Problematic pause.
I actually think the first page does a better job of info dumping than the whole of Book 1. Don't think books these days do this as much. You usually end up with characters telling each other things that they already know. If you're past me and you're reading these out of order because you're 12 and you're sharing a school library with 2,000 other students, this is absolutely perfect. So if you get to the end of Book 1 and you're a little confused, don't be. You can leap into Book 2 with zero problems. It's going to explain everything to you, including the stuff it managed to leave out of Book 1 because clearly they ran out of page count. We open with the whole of the Animorphs gang flying. If you'll remember, Tobias is still stuck in hawk form because he stayed in morph too long last time. So just a quick reminder that they can't stay morphed for more than 2 hours. It's kind of the one rule of morphing, and definitely one that they all follow all the time. So they get shot at by some bad people, but they go full swoop and snatch the gun away because Rachel is the best and she will Bald Eagle Talon your weapons away from you. Because Rachel is great. Then we have our first, I guess this is okay-ish, but I don't think it would get published in a book now. And Marco says that it's not that great having raptor vision, because then you can see how ugly girls are. Marco is not growing on me. Don't worry, Rachel's there to save the day. Your problem isn't with people seeing you too well, I said. It's with people hearing you too well. You look like a fairly smart guy. Then you open your mouth. Also, Marco is clearly whatever the equivalent of a troll is here, because Marco lives to annoy people. He really is extremely smart and basically nice underneath it all. It's just that the boy loves to provoke people. Screw you, Marco. Marco makes the great point that if it weren't for the body-snatching alien slugs, they could all be famous. Way to go, Marco. Really sums up the gravity of the situation. Tobias is stuck as a hawk. We learnt that the door underground in the school to the Yerk pool has just gone, so they need to find a new way of getting to the Yerk pool. Also, important to note, as we apparently learned in Book 1, the Yerks have to go back to the Yerk pool every 3 days to get re-Yerkified, else it starts to kind of wear off. This is mostly plot convenient, but I guess it kind of makes sense. Maybe? I don't see how this works for the Yerks as like a people. What are they trying to achieve? But we can't think too hard about that. There's plot to be had. So we learn that Melissa Chapman is Assistant Vice Principal Chapman, Yerky cult leader, his daughter. Her and Rachel used to be friends because they used to do gymnastics together, but now they aren't. Drama. Because they need to get access to the Yerk pools again, Rachel decides to befriend Melissa at gymnastics, but Melissa's not really having any of it. I'm kind of with Melissa here, Rachel. And Melissa's acting weird. I went to a gymnastics class when I was younger. I don't think you can blame that on slugs. So Rachel's walking over to the gym and she gets laid out by a sketchy dude in a car and she just turns into an elephant. Or she turns halfway into an elephant and he full on runs away. I wish I could turn into an elephant whenever anyone leered at me. So the sketchy man runs away from half-elephant woman and hopefully learns a lesson about respecting women. But Rachel's shoes have been ruined by half-morphing into elephant feet, and to top it off it's raining and she has to walk home, and her car pulls up and it's her knight in shining armour. Oh no, wait. No, that's Assistant Principal Chapman. We learn a bit more about Rachel. After this, we learn that her mother's a lawyer, which may explain why Rachel is a bit intense. The gang are incredibly rude to Rachel at this point. Okay, it's mostly Jake. You can tell that all the men in this book are terrible except Tobias. Jake gets at Rachel for turning into an elephant because apparently morphing in public is not the done thing. Screw you, Jake. She didn't know what that man could have done. She can't control her fight, flight, or turn into an elephant reflexes. Dick off. So the Animorphs decide that their best bet for getting into the egg pool is to full-on spy on Chapman. A lot of these books are about spying, and they realise that they can sneak into his house by disguising one of them as Melissa's cat. This is quite creepy, really. It is creepy, but because it's the Animorphs, we kind of wave that under the carpet. It's fine to impersonate your friend's pets, and surely there's some ethical dilemma here. It gets better. The cat's called Fluffer McKitten. So far the cats in this book have been called Dude and Fluffer McKitten. So they get to outside Chapman's house and they can't get the cat. It's practically farcical. So Rachel ends up turning into a shrew to lure the cat, and they finally manage to get the cat DNA. This takes up about 3 pages, which in books this short is quite a high percentage of time just being spent like chasing a cat around, and I imagine the Benny Hill theme playing in the background. But apparently it's not time to turn into the cat yet, so we go back home to wait out the next phase of plan impersonate everyone's cats. Rachel then has a really terrible dream involving being a shrew and maggots, and it's all very unpleasant, but this feels like the start of Rachel processing the trauma that these teens have been through, which is going to become a really important theme in these books. Rachel manages to get to school after some comforting words from Jake, who is apparently forgiven for his victim-blaming nonsense. She gets to school and Melissa's crying, but she won't explain why. I'm kind of with Melissa on this one. Rachel, you haven't been her friend in quite a long time. She doesn't owe you an explanation for why she's sad, and maybe she doesn't want to talk to an ex-friend about it. It's a few days later. There's a paper to write and a birthday party to go to. Rachel's back on board and she's ready to turn into a cat. So she does, and we get more of that description of what it's like to be a cat. She describes it as being like Clint Eastwood, which I, again, don't know if that's a reference that has really lasted the years. So she's turned into a cat and she's invading the house. Melissa's there, she's doing maths homework. Chapman is going downstairs into the basement. Oh, he goes through something that's described as like a Star Trek door. When it was installed, did Melissa not ask any questions? And who installed the door? Evil villain Vissa 3, you remember him, he's the evil Yig who's taken over an Andalite body, who can morph into terrifying alien beasts, blah blah blah, we get it. But he's there in hologram form, and Melissa hears them talking about them. At this stage, they all still think that these 5 kids are actually Andalite bandits who've escaped the Yigs and have come to Earth and are fighting them. They have no idea that these are 5 somewhat incompetent, a little bit sexist teenagers. So Vissa 3 says, well, we need to kill them so that we can leave no survivors, so that we can take over the planet properly. Again, why? What do you want? At this point, they notice that there's just a random cat sat there listening, and Vissa 3 says, oh, it's clearly one of them, you should definitely kill the cat. But Rachel does her best, oh, I'm definitely a very indifferent cat, my friend, not a person listening to you impression, and they just sort of let her go. There's also a little bit to do with Chapman's kind of internal battle between himself as a father and the Yig trying to possess his mind. So we get a little bit of that paternal instinct saying, don't kill my daughter's cat, please. Then Vissa 3 puts this kind of strange tubey thing over the guy's head, but he's still a hologram, and I can't explain it well, so I'm going to read it to you. Where the Andalite head had been, there was now a long, thick tube. There was an opening like some horrible mouth at the end of the tube. The thing was purple, but translucent. You could almost see through it, although I wasn't sure if that was because it was a hologram or if the animal itself was that way. The hologram Vissa lowered the tube mouth towards Chapman's head. The mouth opened, revealing hundreds, maybe thousands of tiny suckers, each dripping slime. It seemed as if the tube mouth closed over Chapman's head. Yes. So the tube thing is actually called a Varnax, which is a Yik bane, so kind of like a natural predator of the Yik, and it sucks the Yik out of the person's head. Oh yeah, and I should mention Ms. Chapman. They call her Ms. Chapman. What a great use of a title. But she's also a controller, and she's there saying, you know, like, okay, we'll go with the plan. It's gonna be fine. Don't kill him. And then Melissa appears and asks for help with her maths homework, and it's the most tragic moment. So she asks for help with her homework, but clearly the slugs aren't feeling too up to doing the parental illusion right now, and they just say no. And Melissa's left sobbing. She goes off to do her maths homework alone. It's so sad. So then there's one of these moments where it's actually a little bit creepy when you think about it too hard, but it's probably fine, where Rachel goes in cat form to comfort Melissa, and they have some pets and everything's going to be okay. Because Melissa thinks it's her fault her parents don't love her anymore. Oh, we have our first kind of mention of like the full 90s cliche of like, how am I supposed to save the world? But also, perhaps calculus. We get a little bit more backstory about why Rachel cares so much about this. Her parents are divorced and she's kind of empathising with Melissa's feelings. You know, it makes sense. So the Animorphs are going to go meet up again, and we get a little bit of a flying conversation between Tobias and Rachel, where we actually get the kind of the first from Tobias talk about what it's like being a hawk and whether he's having a good time or not. And he kind of says, well, I really like being a hawk. There's some stuff I can't do and I miss. I think he's just sitting on a sofa, which seems like an odd choice. But you know, overall though, he seems to be quite pleased with being a hawk. We're going to get more into this in book 3. Marco, who as ever has a real handle on the situation, suggested they get matching outfits. Oh, but Marco's sad because he's not spending enough time with his dad, and I think this is probably meant to make me feel a bit better for Marco or feel more nice towards him, but it's not working. Okay, so now we get the mention of something that I'm fairly sure has never been mentioned up to this point. Kandrona. I was very confused, but immediately there's an info dump, so we're fine. So the Kandrona is something they need to destroy because it sends out rays that are concentrated in the Yurt pool. I'm not really sure of anything beyond that. That was the quote I had. But to do that, they need to get back to the Yurt pool, they need to find an entrance. So it's time for the next phase of the plan. But Jake has been grounded. We don't know why. Also, there's implied that something's going on with Cassie. We don't know what. We have to wait until there's a book with Cassie in it, presumably, to find out what that is. But we then get a really great line that I'm going to read to you. I found I soon lost interest in Cassie's expression. Cats don't really have that much interest in humans at all, unless food is involved. Hard relate. So Rachel's prowling about like a cat again, and then in a kind of oh snap moment, Jake is on Cassie as a flea. I really want the behind the scenes moment where Jake decided to become a flea, had to catch a flea, had to hold on to a flea long enough to capture its DNA, and then morph into a flea. Like, I need that. Please give it to me. He was never grounded. For some reason, everyone decided to have a big conspiracy against Rachel and put Jake on her as a flea, and it would all be fine. Why they didn't just tell her this, I don't know. But of course they get caught because they do exactly what they did the time before and just sort of sit listening to Chapman in cat form like a cat would never do. And as Rachel says, we were busted. Really bad. Why don't they just immediately shoot the cat? Why does there seem to be this need to capture the cat? Maybe to get information on the other Andalites? I don't know. So Vista 3 says to Mr. and Mrs. Chapman, you need to bring the cat, because we're going to interrogate it, and also bring your daughter, Melissa. It's time for us to put a yeek in her brain. And we get a big moment of the kind of internal parent trying to win out against the evil yeek in their brain, and the Chapmans basically like self-choke in order to stop having to bring Melissa in. I would really love to see what it's like to look at this from the outside with no idea what's going on. Like they're just the postman or something's wandered in and just sees these two people choking themselves and their daughter stood there like, what's going on? And a terrifying hologram of a blue horns person. What would that be like? So Alyssa turns up and is understandably a little confused as to why her father, who, let's remember, she's convinced hates her for some unknown reason, is taking her precious cat away. But then Tobias chases, in full hawk form, chases the real Fluffer McKitten into the cat carrier with Rachel. And Fluffer McKitten seems to be incredibly confused as to why he can smell himself, but it's a different cat. And of course, because we're 20 pages from the end, the threat of the 2-hour-long morph is looming its head. So Rachel tells Jake to go away. She's going to sacrifice herself. She's willing to stay in cat form forever to stop them from finding out about the others. So she just tells him to go. She scratches him off, which is amusing. But anyway, and she checks that he's gone. So Rachel, still a cat, meets Vista 3 in person and gets a little bit interrogated. And then Yik Chapman explains that he really can't have his host, his internal host, rebelling against him, especially not if he's in public, because he doesn't want to start choking himself in the middle of a teacher's meeting or something. He says, please let Melissa go, let her live a Yik-free life, and I'll do what you say. So he's basically blackmailing the biggest, baddest evil in these books. Which, you know, I can respect. Surprise, surprise, Jake never really left. He was just tricking her. Again, why? But he's got to get them out of there with 15 minutes left to go. So he turns back into a person and then turns into a tiger, which apparently resets the 2-hour morph thing. I don't know. And we get a little bit of play with kind of like half morphs, because Cassie like half morphs out the cat carrier and then morphs back into cat form. So she doesn't reset, but she get... I didn't make sense of these though. So Rachel only has minutes left to morph, and Vista 3 is coming after her, but Tobias swoops in, picks her up in cat form, takes her away, and then drops her, and she morphs back from cat to person in midair and lands perfectly because she's a gymnast. It all comes full circle. Everyone's okay. Again, They've saved no one. They've barely saved themselves. And it's time for the epilogue. Melissa's back in gymnastics and she seems to be okay-ish. And Rachel does the creepiest thing ever, which is type out a note on her word processor. Melissa, your father loves you more than you will ever know and more than he can ever show you. Signed, someone who knows. If I got that note, I'd feel that was the creepiest thing in the world and also be terribly anxious because I'm a teenage girl who's clearly hiding my insecurities. I'd be so anxious that somebody knew my secret, which was that my dad hates me. What? No. And then Tobias gets the excellent ending line. There will be a next time, Tobias said. There will be a next time until the Andalites return. And there is a next time. We've got 52 more books, and the next book has Tobias on the cover. But there was a 2-month wait. People had to wait 2 months to find out what happened next. Madness. So yes, let's go through the morphs. I have my list here. We get shrew, cat, birds of various kinds, a flea, an almost elephant, a tiger, and a kind of half cat, half human affair. Thank you so much for watching this somewhat garbled Animorphs 2. This book is a little bit more difficult to do than book 1 because so much more of it's about a specific plot line rather than kind of the fun of book 1. But I'm really excited to go on to book 3, which has Tobias in, and keep going. Thank you for all the support you gave to book video 1. If you want to watch that, there's a link one of these ways. And as ever, you can follow me on Twitter, on Instagram, you can subscribe, and you can also follow my blog because I have a lot of really good reviews coming out there as well. And I will see you in the next one.